What's up guys, it's Izzy here, welcome back to Yugioh deck of the day. Today we are doing an update on the Shadoll deck profile, and the reason I decided to update this deck right now is because of the Magistus archetype that got released in Genesis Impact. I think that if you want to play more of a pure deck that doesn't utilize Invoked, Dogmatica and stuff, this is probably the deck list that you should be playing. It's not as pure as it should be, but the Magistus deck actually made this deck much more consistent. I'm going to explain you why a small Magistus engine fixes pretty much all the problems that Shaddolls have, which is either not getting to a fusion spell or not having a light monster to summon construct. So yep, before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So for the Shuttle Monsters, we have 3 copies of Ria Shuttle Wendy. She's the best Shuttle by far. You play 4 copies of her because she's a level 3 psychic, so you can get access to her with emergency teleport, and when she's sent to the grave by a card effect, you special summon a Shuttle from your deck in face down defense position. She's part of the combo, pretty much everyone knows this already. 3 copies of Squamata, sending any Shuttle card from your deck to the grave. You can use this with Mathematician to send your Shuttle core to the grave, which is a card I do play. Most lists do not really play Shuttle core, but I think having this one copy in a deck because of Shuttle Squamata is important because you can get back your fusion spells in case maybe your fusion monsters got negated when they were trying to recycle the fusion spells, or they didn't even touch the grave and your opponent had QB on the field, the virtual ward, level 9 synchro, and they got banished. So you need to be able to get back your fusion spell in order to be able to play. 2 copies of Ariel. Ariel is usually a one-off, but I really enjoy playing 2 copies in the deck. I feel more safe during the late game when I play 2 copies, because you usually use the first one during your first turn combo by using your construct, and then you don't really have anything else to do with your Ria Shadoll incarnation aside from just using it on the field effect to loop construct. But having the second copy of Ariel gives you the same kind of combo during the late game, and this combo during the late game it summons Boral Sword instead of summoning Appaloosa like it does turn 1, and that means you can OTK your opponent very easily. So I think this card is really good, and the fact that it's a water monster means that it's a different attribute than all the other Shaddolls, so even if you draw her, you can just use her for Upcalone, which is basically a negate. Some decks don't really lose to Winda, and you don't want to summon Winda against decks that don't really get hurt by her, so you just summon Upcalone instead to try to disrupt your opponent. 2 copies of Beast, draw cards, pretty simple. 2 copies of Hedgehog, not 3, I think 2 are perfectly fine because it's not really part of the combo. You want to use either Squamata or a Wendy to go for the combo. If you use Hedgehog, yes, you can search one of them, but then you will need a second fusion spell in order to use its effect, but still it's a really good card. And 1 copy of Dragon for those backrow decks. No Falcon. Falco, I think, has been power crept completely out of the deck. It's very slow, and the effect to bring back a monster face down is also very slow because you would have to wait a turn to flip face up, and most players, if they know you have a Falco face down, they are not going to attack Falco, or if they do, they will just negate its effect with something. For the normal summons of the deck, we have 3 copies of Liliana, Magistus of Vera. This card is basically the new Alistair of the deck. So the problem with Alistair is that it searches invocation, but the old invocation only fuses from the hand if you're not summoning an invoked fusion monster. And sometimes you just don't want to go for Mechaba. If you don't have anything else, yes, Alistair is a 1-card Mechaba, but when you go for the Shuttle combo, this card, not only does it give you a fusion spell that fuses from anywhere from your field and hand, so you can use her as well, and she's also a light monster, which means that she fixes the problems of Shaddolls having no access to fusion spells and no access to light monsters sometimes, which is what led to this deck breaking, so this is why I think this card is really insane. Same thing with 3 copies of Mathematician. Mathematician serves a similar purpose, but instead of giving you access to a fusion spell, it can give you access to a Shuttle monster by setting Hedgehog, and can now give you access to a light monster because you can just link away your Mathematician for an Artemis, and so you have a link monster on the field that is light, which is something you could not do before because you cannot use Mathematician for Almiraz and secure Gardener because it has 1500 attack, so you cannot go into Almiraz with it. So these 2 normal summons actually make more sense now in the deck, and they make the deck a lot more consistent. 1 copy of Triclone. This is here for the going second combo. When you activate Shuttle Fusion, you can use its effect to send monsters from the deck, so you have a light monster in your deck that can actually bring itself back to go into Crossship. For the Hunters, play 3 copies of Nibiru. It's a light monster, so this is why main decking this card in this deck doesn't really bother me at all. Even if it's completely dead, even if you're playing against a deck that you cannot resolve this whatsoever, you can just use it for fusion material for construct, which is good enough for a card. And 3 copies of Gamma with 1 driver. Again, this card is very good when you can actually resolve its effect to basically use when you have no monsters on the field, even if you're not going second. So if you just activate a Shuttle Fusion, then basically you can protect it from any kind of disruption, even an Ash Blossom, so you can get more monsters on the field to go into link plays. And it's of course a light monster, so even if you've used Gamma and you keep drawing more Gammas during the late game and you cannot actually use their effects, you can use them as fusion material. Next up, we have 3 copies of Shuttle Fusion. I think this card is broken much better than L Shuttle Fusion, just because of the free advantage it gives you. A lot of people claim that L Shuttle Fusion is a disruption of the deck. Yes, this is true, but sometimes this deck does not win through disruption, it wins through sheer advantage, and the advantage you get is because of Shuttle Fusion, because getting a free Shuttle Fusion summon from the deck while also getting Triclone's effect, a Shuttle's effect, and then using Construct's effect and doing the full combo with one card can give you so much advantage that your opponent will not be able to keep up with. 3 copies of Shuttle Fusion. You need to max this out, of course, because it's something that you will be using in case your Shuttle Fusion gets negated, or you can use this during your opponent's turn to summon Winda or Upcalone to disrupt your opponent. You need to max these because you need to see a fusion spell. 2 copies of Magistus Invocation, along with 3 copies of Vere and all those fusion spells. You have 11 copies for fusion spells, which is a lot more than what a Shuttle deck usually has, because like I said before, if you're using an invoked engine, you need to hard draw a light monster in order to be able to use that invocation for something other than Mechaba, which is something that the deck couldn't really do very consistently. It either needed to play more light hand traps like Veiler and stuff, or more clowns, which is not very optimal because the clowns are very bricky if you don't draw them with a fusion spell. So this is why I think this in part of the invocation card is much better than the old invocation, and I prefer running Riliona rather than playing Alistair. And for the one-off spells, we play 1 E-Tele because of Wendy. Hopefully, maybe we can get more copies of E-Tele during the next ban list, and this will actually boost the deck a lot by giving you more copies of Wendy. And 1 copy of Foolish Burial because with Squamata this can turn into any card in the deck. For the traps, play 2 copies of Shadow Incarnation. Incarnation is a card that's part of the combo during the first turn, but even if you draw this card, it's actually a really good card. It creates an infinite loop with Construct. You can just keep reviving Construct, and when Construct goes to the grave, you can just get this back and then use the same effect. And each time you do this, Construct will be sending another card from your deck to the grave, so you get free advantage just by doing this. And it has the grave effect as well, that you can banish it with another Shadow card to flip face up one of your face down Shadows, and usually that monster will be Ariel, and then you have banished Construct with the Incarnation, so Ariel will bring back Construct, and you know the loop. It just keeps giving you more advantage with this card. 1 copy of Shadow Core. I think people should start playing this in Shadows. I've seen a lot of lists that do not really play this because, yes, they're afraid that this card is a little bit bricky if you draw it, but even if you do draw it, it's just a monster you can use for fusion material with Shuttle Fusion. But this card gives you so much utility just having in the deck because of Mathematician. You can just send a Squamata, then send this and get back one of your fusion spells. Sometimes, yes, you can get back the fusion spells with your fusion monsters, but what if they get negated? What if your opponent has a Dweller on the field? And what if you don't have all the fusion spells you need? Because sometimes just having 1 fusion spell is not enough. Maybe 2 fusion spells are not enough. If you have all 3 fusion spells, you can make sure you bait all of your opponent's negates, and then you can resolve the 3rd one, and then you can go through, because if the opponent knows what they're doing against this deck, they will probably keep their negates. If they have only negates, they will keep the fusion spells. And if they resolve, then basically your deck is completely useless, because otherwise you cannot really do anything aside from fusion summoning. So if your fusion spells do not resolve, you can't do anything. For the extra deck, we play 3 copies of Construct. You need to max out on her. She will be summoned pretty much every single game, all 3 copies, unless you somehow manage to kick your opponent really fast, but she's very important for the grind game. 2 copies of Winda. If your opponent plays a deck that loses to Winda, then it's very common to summon her. If you don't think you can win with Winda, then I don't think you need to bother summoning her at all. You play 2 copies of Upcalone, which is the next card. So Upcalone is the one that replaces Winda against the matchups that you don't really think Winda can win, and you just use the 2 copies of Ariel as an extra body to be able to summon Upcalone more consistently. This is why I think Ariel is not a brick. Even if you draw her, you can just use her for Upcalone, and Upcalone has a much better grave effect than all the other Shuttle monsters, because you can not just get back a Shuttle spell and trap, you can actually get back any Shuttle card or any card from your deck, and then you discard a card so you trigger a Shuttle effect as well. And 1 copy of Shaky Naga, just because Mathematician is the deck, she's summonable. Sometimes you can summon her, and her effect is very good, and 3000 defense is actually very big, so if your opponent doesn't deal with her fast enough, you will resolve a lot of Shuttle effects while negating a lot of effects in the process. For the Link monsters, we have Artemis, the Moon Magistus. This card is insane, so just making this with Mathematician is good enough of a reason to play it. It's a light monster that you can use any level 4 lower spellcaster monster, so it's not just a Mathematician. Previously, if you had drawn a handful of Shuttle monsters and a Shuttle Fusion, you couldn't do anything basically other than just going for a Winda and hoping your opponent didn't have anything to destroy. But now, even if you draw like something a Squamata and a Wendy, you can just summon the Squamata and then turn Squamata into Artemis because it's a level 4 lower spellcaster, and then you have the combo with Gravity Controller by being able to use your Construct. So this card gives a lot more consistency in the deck just by having this 1 copy in the extra deck, and this is why this has taken the deck into higher levels. 1 copy of Gravity Controller. In case you cannot summon Cross-Ship, if you don't have an extra summon in your hand, then you summon this with your Construct to be able to use its effect to get back the spell and trap you used to be able to get it, and while also doing the Grave combo effect with Incarnation, so this is why you need to BLA this. And this also is an out to some cards that this deck cannot really out. Cards something like Avramax, which is very hard to deal with, but Gravity Controller just deals with it on its own. 1 copy of Anaconda, no Red Eyes Fusion or something like that. It's just a plain old fusion deck that can copy its own fusion spell, so you can use your Shuttle Fusion to be able to do that. You can actually main deck 1 copy of Super Poly if you feel like it because of a card like Anaconda being in the deck, but I felt like committing one more slot in the extra deck and in the main deck would be too much. You don't really need to. Maybe you can side it if you want to instead, but I think just having Anaconda's effect to copy Shadow Fusion from the deck is really good. One Cross Ship, really good card if you can summon it turn 1, because you can just get Napaloosa along with a winda on the field. It's not very important to tunnel vision and not just be able to summon this card, but if you can summon it, it's very, very good. One copy of Shuttle Construct. I really like this card in the extra deck. I feel it gives a lot more utility in the deck, because sometimes you don't really get to use back your fusion spells, and having this in the grave means that you will always have a way to fusion summon, even if you don't have a fusion spell, while also triggering some subtle effects. So I think this card is really good, and it's a light monster, so that's a plus always in this deck. And for the Link Force, we have one copy of Borrelsword and one copy of Appaloosa. These two are here because of the Incarnation combo. With Cross Ship, you can summon both of them, and usually turn 1 you will be summoning Appaloosa, and this is why I have 2 Ariels in the deck, because I can do this combo again, so I can get more monsters on the field to summon Borrelsword during the late game and try to OTK, because unless I Borrelsword, this deck will grind it out and will not be able to deal a lot of damage very quickly. Usually you will have like one Construct, one winda on the field like used to, but that's not enough to OTK, so this is why Borrelsword is here. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Shadows are a very, very fun deck, but they have a lot of versions of it, and you can pretty much play whichever one you want. If you prefer Dogmaticas and if you can afford them, this is really good. If you prefer having the invoked access to Mechaba, there's that version too. This version is more close to a pure version of the deck, which is why I prefer this one, because it reminds me of how the deck used to play back in the day. So this is why I decided to give you guys this deck profile in case you're a fan of a pure version as well, so you can get an idea of how you can play it very consistently and very competitively. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.